Today I want to talk to you about art, specifically painting and drawing art. The symbolic images in drawing and in painting are possibly the oldest language of the soul. The images, the paintings especially can be found as early as the cave cultures in Europe, Lascaux cave in the Dordogne region of southern France. The paintings there have been dated to something like 17,000 BC, and there are older ones going all the way to 35,000 BC and 40,000 BC. The one in Lascaux are specifically interesting because right at the end of the cave, in the most difficult part of the cave, the darkest part of the cave, is what the journey, our life destiny, if you like, is to be found. And right there, at that most difficult to get to part, the hardest, or rather the chamber, which is the initiation chamber, if you like. There we see a drawing on a wall of a shaman, and a shaman is wearing a bird mask and is lying prostrate on the ground, his penis erect, symbol of trance, and his left hand is pointing to a dying animal, a bison, and his right hand is pointing to a staff, at the apex of which is perched a bird. And bird is probably one of the oldest symbols of the soul, of the feminine. Now, the shaman is in a trance, and he's the one that is meditating between the world of the living, or the outside world symbolized by the dying animal, and the mystery, that is the invisible mystery that supports this visible world. And so the furthest point in the cave, the most difficult to get to, is our ground of being, or rather the most inward center. And it is there that we find union, or we find the reconnection with that divine part, whether we call it soul, which is a feminine name for it, or whether we call it spirit, which is a masculine name for it. We find this dimension. It is that threshold, the place where the shaman, where the artists, where the poets go, where the witches, where the mystics go. And this is where they reconnect with the divine, the most inward center. Now, you would ask, how do we reconnect to this most inward center? Through art. Well, I will use an example of Hans Zimmer, the well-known composer of the music scores, the Gladiator and Lion King, for instance. He won many accolades for that. And Zimmer is no longer working as a producer of music for film, but he's dedicated his life now to teaching people how to do what he does. And the way he puts it is, before the days of smartphone, where you could do all these things, where you could catch the music that I'm just about to tell you how he does it, on a smartphone, he had a tape recorder or a recorder with him. And wherever he went, he used to catch inspiration that moved him, music that touched him. So whether he was in a restaurant or he was driving in a car listening to a radio, and if something moved him, inspired him, he would take out his tape recorder and record that piece of music, that little inspiration. Either maybe he was walking, or he saw something on TV, and he recorded that little bit of music straight away. And then once he sat down to actually put the whole score together, it would be from these fragments of this inspiration that came to him spontaneously. And he put this score, this beautiful now, Oscar-winning scores and so on. And it is from being centered, from wanting to for looking for inspiration anywhere in the world, to what you're actually going to do, what you're actually trying to put together. And the universe or the soul is going to respond to you to help you to that, and is going to send all these inspirations, all these bits and pieces from which you put the puzzle back together once you sit down and actually create a piece of music that you want to communicate something through. And this is the way that Hans Zimmer does it, and it's the way that I use for painting or for drawing. It's exactly the same way. And for instance, in the paintings that I describe in my new book, Where We Dreamed a Single Dream, and on the cover of the book, there's a picture of my painting of a lady standing in front of pyramids. She's wearing a red dress with a blue cap, and she's got the classic S form. Now, the way I did it is exactly the same as Hans Zimmer does it. I collected the bits and pieces, and then I put the whole painting together. But first I wanted to know that I knew that I wanted to have a painting of a woman, for some reason, in a striking background. So what I did is I went to a library, to my local library, looking through art books, and the only art books that really talked to me was Art Nouveau. The reason being is that the ladies in there were drawn in these very slim, long figures, and these figures reminded me of towers, of these slim trees, these archetypal images, the axis mundi. And they were wearing long dresses, long flowing evening dresses. And I don't remember which book exactly or how I got the image that I used on that particular image with the pyramids. It might have been actually from Glossy magazine. I used to also look through, at that time, through magazines, through Vogue, the 1940s, 1950s, even earlier 1930s Vogue magazines in the library. And there the designers, the fashion designers, used exactly the same images. So it could have been, the image that I use on the book could have come from there. And then another day I was flipping through a glossy magazine somewhere, and right at the back of the magazine, the back cover had a huge glossy ad for, I think it was for cigarettes back in the day. It might have been Benson and Hedges, golden sort of a box for cigarettes, a golden packet of cigarettes. And there in the background were the pyramids. So I grabbed the lady that I found somewhere in the Art Nouveau book. I grabbed the pyramids, and then the rest came to me, really. I don't know where I got the green background of the sunset from, but it came to me while I was actually painting, putting the whole pieces together, like the platform on which the lady stands, the checkered platform, the union of the visible and the invisible, and she is the soul, she is the mediator between the two dimensions, you see, like the shaman in Lascaux Cave being the mediator between the two dimensions. So is she. She's wearing a blue cap and a red dress. She, the heaven and the earth as one. And that's how I put the things together and form into a painting. Now, some of you are going to say, well, but you have skills, you're an artist and so on. But you know what? I didn't have skills. I didn't have skills. Skills come to you. In the moment when you're working, when you're doing the research and so on, when you decide to actually sit and put the ideas, put the puzzle back together, as it were, from the things that you collected here and there, the skills to do it will come to you, intuitively will come to you, because the moment you're working, your inspiration, you're still plugged into this level of the soul, to this dimension within which we swim, which is, the interconnecting dimension of the quantum field, and within which there is the whole information of everything, if you like. So the knowledge to do what you have to do, how to use the brush, which colors to use, the style to use and everything will come to you, but you have to get involved. And another way that I, for instance, do paintings for a long time was also I would draw the images, the symbols that came to me in my dreams, especially archetypal things that I didn't understand. The personal things were not so much interest to me at all, but the archetypal were. And in one painting that I did of a dream that I share in my book, is the dream of the spiral. In my book I call it the spiral initiation, and it was in that, through that spiral, that the lady, the Egyptian princess, I called her back then, now we could say Isis, the goddess Isis, took me through, dove into a stream, having me in tow, underwater, where I learned that I could breathe like a fish, and we entered through this enormous spiral, rotating ever so slowly through its dead center into the other dimension. Now I painted that. And again, I used just, I found the image of a lady that I liked somewhere in a book. I put that, and the funny thing that back then, this was it's hanging just over here, it was 1996, and I didn't really know anything about mythology or anything like that, or the symbols for that matter, or the psychology. The funny thing that I included at her feet, little wings, that you can see on in mythology, for instance, in Greek mythology, the Hermes, or Mercury in Rome. He's the messenger between the two dimensions. He comes and takes the souls of the dead to afterlife. He's the psychopomp, and so was she for me. So I painted these images, these striking images that I didn't understand, so that I wouldn't forget them, you see. And it was really later, much later, many years later, after I had the experience, I had the dream, that during the research, that I found the connections, intuitive connections to what the dreams mean. But the impulse to remember them was first in art. To put things into art, like the lady with the pyramids, or the lady that drags me through the spiral. I put that first into art. It felt like it's the important thing to do, so you don't forget what is trying to communicate through you, And so that we could say this is the way that you reunite with the other dimension, with the soul, through art, when you actually collect pieces here and there and put it into one painting or a drawing, and the skills that you're going to use, if you think you don't have skills, will come to you. They will come intuitively, but you've got to get involved, and then things will sort of evolve on their own. Or if you're not, if you have really deep archetypal dreams, put that image on a painting or a drawing. And when the time comes, when you feel like you have to dive deeper into what it means, you've collected the right books, you're reading, you're researching, it'll be again in the work that you're doing, it'll be the answers that you want, the connections, the intuitive connections to what you have experienced and what the culture, the whole of humanity is experiencing. You will realize that it's the one and the same thing. You see, so art is the way, you could say, it's the original language of the soul, the original symbolic language of the soul, as well as a means for you to reconnect with the deeper, the collective dimension of our psyche, of the universe, the conscious universe that is trying to communicate with you. And that's the wholeness. Reconnecting your personal unconscious to the collective unconscious, or you could say your personal life to the life of the soul that is the soul of everything.